All right. Good evening, everybody. This is the Economic Development Committee. I'm going to call this meeting to order. And if we can do a roll call vote of members to make sure that we have a quorum, that would be fantastic. Councilor Gordon, would you mind calling off the roll?
Councilor Garrett,
I'm here.
Councilor Verdon, I am here. Councilor Minhas is not here.
Haven't heard from him either.
Councilor Gilman is here. That's why I'm confused, because I'm like, right. Okay.
So we have a quorum. Great. All right. Our first order of business is the approval of minutes from May 7th. Does anyone have, well, we need a motion and a second actually on that first. Could I get one of you folks to give us a motion and a second?
I move that we approve the minutes.
Okay.
On May 7th. Second.
All right. Any discussion from members of the committee on the minutes?
I was not here for that meeting, but I did watch.
Okay.
So I feel that I can vote.
All right. Any further discussion? All right. Let's do just a quick roll call, not roll call.
Don't even
The
have to do roll call.
Other time.
No unnecessary roll call.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
We got minutes that are approved. We are now to public comments. Are there any members of the public who would like to make a comment? You will have 3 minutes if you so choose to do so. No one is present in person, so this is really to members of the community that are on the meeting digitally, which I think is just the recorder, the man sitting next to me, and Aaron, who's driving a car. All right. Sounds like we're not going to have public comments. So the public comment period is closed. We have no public hearing this meeting, and we do have a motion. I'm going to actually let this person know. Hello, iPhone user. We have just ended the public comment period, but if you were hoping to make a public comment, please just enter your name in the chat and you'd be welcome to do so. So again, just the person who just joined the meeting, if you want to make a comment, this is your chance.
He's here. I will uncross him off.
Okay, I'm going to take that as there's no comment needed. And we are now to item number 6. Welcome, Councilor Minhas. Nice to see you. Which is petition the state legislature to create new annual on-premise all alcohol liquor license beyond Greenfield's quota for Gleason Ventures, LLC, doing business as Bears Den. I believe this is a motion, so we're going to need somebody to read it. It's on page 6 of the packet. If folks don't have that pulled up, I'm happy to provide that to them.
Read it.
That'd be great.
I just read what I see here.
Yep.
The City Council, upon recommendation of Mayor DeSorger, moved that it be ordered that the City Council moves to petition the state legislature to create a new annual on-premise all alcohol liquor license beyond Greenfield's quota for the Bears Den, owned by Gleason Ventures, LLC, located at 5 Bank Row, Greenfield, Mass. 01301. Majority vote required.
Second.
Beautiful. So we are now in discussion. I know Chief of Staff Anhalt had some comments that she wanted to give to this. Aaron, are you able to hear us? And would you like to comment on this?
Yeah, I can hear you. I hope you guys can hear me. I am almost in Delaware where the cell service gets better. So fingers crossed, once I get across the bridge, we'll be good. So I've been working with Adam and Kimberly Gleason for several months. The Bears Den is going into where Seymour's used to be on Bank Row. There had previously been a liquor license associated with that property. However, there were a lot of issues surrounding improper licensing procedures, back taxes for a different owner. It was just a mess. So I've been working with ABCC, which is the state licensing, the alcohol licensing board. We have a seasonal license procured for them. But because Greenfield is over our quota for how many licenses we can have, and the previous license, they need to apply for a legislational liquor license.
Got it.
Any questions?
Any questions from members of the committee about this?
I did have a question. So it looked like in the paperwork that prior license had been given back. So does that make it now available?
Yes, that is correct.
So does that make it now available?
Because it
or are we
was
still over quota?
So that was the one that was over quota. So now we are at quota. So
Okay.
there are no currently available licenses.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any downside to petitioning the legislature for this?
I would, in my experience, having seen it done other places, I don't think so. The liquor licenses in Massachusetts are fairly, I would say, archaic in a lot of ways.
That's the nicest way you could have put
I
it.
There's no downside. This license is not sellable. In a traditional license, you can sell to a different person. This particular license, you wouldn't ever be able to sell, but they would be able to move it from location to location. So it doesn't add a permanent one if the business doesn't, if they decide to move on or anything, it does not necessarily add a permanent license. I don't think there is much of a downside, especially since there was already a license associated with that business address.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Anybody else in the committee want to comment on this?
I agree with,
You start speaking.
I agree with Aaron that the way that we do this in Massachusetts is completely archaic and this is a business issue. This place is currently empty. We want to be able to fill it. There are good folks who are working really, really hard to try to open a business there. It seems like there's absolutely no reason not to support this so that they can do that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm just going to piggyback off of that. I mean, we have to figure out ways to increase business, not decrease them. And it seems like they're doing everything else is the only kind of key piece that's missing. So why not help them out and see if the legislature can help us out?
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. All right, any further discussion or are we ready to take a vote on this, folks? All right, all in favor of petition the legislature to get Bears Den their liquor license? Aye. Okay, the motion passes. And now we are on to discussion.
Thank you, go. I'm headed off.
All right, enjoy Delaware.
Thanks.
Oh, we got another.
Starting a new corporation.
Yeah, I know, really. They love it there. Okay. All right, we are now to our discussion. We have a new item here and a guest who has created a presentation to share with us. So without any objection, I'd like to invite Michael Mullen to present his presentation on the idea of eliminating parking requirements citywide and potentially imposing parking limits or maximum for some uses. Okay. Looks like it's working.
I believe it's working. I think we are up and running. So I'm going to talk a little bit here, but I'm going to try to just do this as like a facilitative thing. We'll go from there. So the basic gist of what I'm going to try to do is outline just like the current conditions. I'm going to hope that I'm going to assume there's some degree of familiarity with the existing text of section 232 about parking requirements.
Do you want to start with maybe a little bit about who you are so that the public...
I'm Michael Mullen and I live at 316 Chapman Street.
And why are you here talking to us about parking mandates?
Why? Because I talk about it so much that they put me on the Parking and Traffic Commission.
That is perfect. Thank you.
Yes.
And I would also just ask, since we, I think as a committee are familiar with section 200-32, but members of the public very likely are not.
Yes.
Exciting as it is.
Yeah.
So if you wouldn't mind just kind of giving folks a download on what that section does.
Yeah. All right. So what that is I got my little zoning note here. It's basically a part of the zoning ordinances. And at a very high level, zoning is a limitation on real property rights, which are typically conceived of as a bundle of rights encompassing possession, control, exclusion, enjoyment, and disposition. So zoning basically regulates densities and uses. Doesn't density regulate the structure of a building per se? That's a building code question. And so parking mandates basically are a set of rules such that if you want to use your property to do A, B, or C, you have to provide X, Y, or Z amount of parking. So If you really want super curious, I recommend reading section 232 on the E code in the packet. I believe there is a sort of redlined revision. So if anyone looks at those notes, they could kind of really kind of get into the weeds there. It's lengthy. And so I'm going to avoid reading it. I'm also going to avoid having giant blocks of text up on the wall for now. I'm going to try to keep the conversation a little more like less 4 spaces or 3 spaces based on 500 square feet. And a little more, are these the types of things that we want to have? Maybe if it were opposite day and we didn't have any parking requirements, would we want to impose them? And there has been a large body of research since parking requirements became trendy or like kind of a regular part of zoning ordinances nationwide that suggest that maybe they aren't such a good idea. And so maybe I'd just like to give this as a space to sort of facilitate having that conversation about like how exactly it might not be a good idea.
Well, thank you for doing so.
We'll see how that goes. Does that answer the general question before I?
Spectacular.
Okay. All right. So I'm basically saying I think we should eliminate them, and the proposed revision in the packet is a draft that specifically eliminates them. Some of the reasons that we are going to be exploring maybe suggest that there might even be merit to capping or putting maximums on the amount of parking that someone could provide. I'm going to say that my own bias a little, well, it can feel a little arbitrary to come up with what's the right maximum. So some of the complaints that someone might have against parking minimums, that they're arbitrary and don't necessarily make sense and might not be grounded in sort of good reasoning, good decision making, might also kind of apply to parking maximums. There also might be other approaches in theory in the policy world to help deal with some of these negative externalities, costs that are associated with having parking requirements, or I'm sorry, with sort of like ample superfluous inventory of parking within an entire municipal area. I don't know if in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, any of those are really like a lever that we at a municipal level can pull right now. That might be a get together with a few other people, look at some other models that are happening across the country and thinking about in lieu of fees, but particularly related to adding parking above a certain number or getting into taxing or tax incentives that may enable, say, hey, you have a lot of parking here. Would you like to get rid of it? We might give you a discount. There's sort of things that like are realistically there, but like if you say where's the policy lever, I don't actually know if we're able to pull that right now. So if we want to get there, it might be something that comes up. So all of that said, here's the way that I'm going to try to frame this conversation. We have a sustainable master plan, and they kind of have a nice little thing where they talk about sustainability. And I guess I would like to suggest that maybe like parking minimums are kind of unsustainable. What does that mean? Some stuff from the master plan that they say is that what is sustainability? Sustainability is meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet our own needs. So maybe we're kind of compromising ourselves or making some intergenerational, especially across decades. A lot of real estate development investments are not something that just happens next week. These are sort of cyclical. And so we might be missing opportunities to make our place better. Some things about balance among, they call them the 3 E's, environment, the economy, and equity or fairness, that might be a concern with these. And maybe that's redundant. We're also kind of going to think about how like this whole just works as an infrastructure system. Maybe like kind of just as, are we kind of like filling water with a bucket, but poking holes in the bucket at the same time? And that might not be a good idea, regardless of the environmental, economic, or equitable impacts. So this is kind of what I feel our parking requirements are doing with respects to our sustainability goals. I think it's a cell phone. Like, as I see it, there's a lot of things that we don't have control over in our community. Like, this is what, like, no one's making us have these. So that's my take, and maybe we'll see how everyone else kind of feels about that. So I'm going to try to stop talking more or less now. I don't have slide preview, so we'll just see where we end up. To visualize our parking, kind of see what it looks like. borrowing from just some high level maps to kind of maybe help visualize what the land use is. So all of those spots and colors, whether they are blue or orange or green, this is from the downtown parking inventory thing from the 2023 report. It's just nice because it was done by professionals and it's very accurate and it looks good. But you can see that a lot of land gets used for hard top pavement. And if you think that's not good, then you might worry, oh boy, we have a lot of it. I wish I had a map like this for the whole city. If anyone really has a bunch of free time, there's a kind of like open source map from Parking Reform Network, and then you can read how you can go in and start drawing. But this is kind of like a little bit north of Foster's, kind of near the Pioneer Valley Medical Center. Is that what they're still called?
Valley Medical.
Valley Medical. And you can kind of see the Valley Medical parking lot, but if you look over at Wells Street and you look over at Chapman, I think most people in their head kind of go, I think there's more parking around there. So we don't really have a good depiction. It would be nice, but I don't know if it's necessary or not. But if everyone says we really need to see this, Mike, then I guess I'll start chipping in away at it.
Free time.
Yeah, this is a little closer to downtown, and there's some things that we could see. And again, just using a little bit of our eyeballs here at the corner of Arch Street and Chapman, it's now that CSO, I think, is renting most of that space. It's been used for a few things in the past. And you can see that there is more parking than there is building. And I'll just sort of leave that as a theme there. There's the CVS we could see on the map, but there's no parking on the map. And I think that might sort of experience a similar sort of proportionality. So there's some limited maps at a high level. And if we think about concrete examples, just go through maybe 3 examples, sort of again, just try to see what the impact is at that. And then we can kind of talk about why. Multifamily dwellings. Has anyone here ever lived in a multifamily? In Greenfield?
Not in Greenfield.
Yeah, not in Greenfield. Okay. Are there some of them?
There are some.
There are some. I think they're a part of the character of our town, this to some extent. We're going to look also at kind of like larger apartment buildings and maybe some adaptive reuse of old manufacturing buildings. Maybe we'll kind of get there. So just in a specific instance of thinking about geometry, like if you have a parking requirement, you are saying that some of that property has to be allocated to providing a parking space. And if you only have so much land, you run out of room, so to speak, which sort of prohibits certain forms of intensification of development. You might have a duplex and think, these 2-bedroom duplexes aren't renting as well as I'd like. There's more demand for 1-bedrooms, maybe. I don't know. But can I add a 3rd unit into the back, or can I add? We ever see homes telescope in Greenfield and they kind of just get longer as they go back? What starts happening when you say, as our policy is right now, that we have 1 unit per space? What does that sort of mean? So a little bit of math here, an example. You have about a 10th acre lot, which is like 5,600 square feet or something like that. There's a duplex providing parking. A normal parking space is about 180 square feet. Realistically, cars have to get into it. So the land that you end up eating gets bigger. So 300 per square feet is kind of what I see when someone says, how much land does it take to provide more parking space? So at about 200 per square feet at a 10th acre lot, you're looking at about 10% of your land being eaten up by parking use. Which like maybe you want, maybe that's what you think that your potential renters or you as the owner want. But if it's required, maybe you don't think that's what it wants. And maybe when you go from a duplex to a triplex, you start running into some even more of a tight squeeze. And I just thought, I don't want to like shout out someone's house. So I'm going to be kind of generic with this. This is from the tax map. This is kind of near downtown, but not in downtown. It's not in the central commercial district. So the parking requirements would apply in theory. These 2 properties are listed as duplexes, I think, on the tax map, but like who knows what those are. There might be 3 there. And you kind of could at least start visualizing, like, where do you fit 2 or upgrade to 3 parking spaces and without either having a lot of blacktop everywhere. And again, there might not be much demand for it. There's a lot of reasons to kind of say like, I'm not sure. So I just want to at least visualize the geometric problem. All right. That gets crazier when you scale up your building.
Right.
Crazy. Anyone know what that is?
It's over by the new CSO building. That's the, what do you call
Is that Mill River?
it? Millbrook? Mill.
Yeah. Mill houses.
Mill, yeah.
I think, yeah. I believe it was an old mill manufacturing site reconverted in the 80s to residential. Yeah, not going to, I can't say I didn't reach out to them and ask, and I didn't count. But I think there's about 100 units there. And if you look at the sort of parking lot there, I think there's also about 100 because they have this lot, which Sunday morning, there's cars, but there's a lot of sections. Yeah, you can even see it from the sky. Like there's a lot of unoccupied spaces. I don't know when this was, but this is Sunday morning. So maybe everyone's at church. Maybe. There's their overflow lot. And so you kind of might wonder whether or not they're abiding. There might be a lot of land use that we might say, like, is this really valuable? Do we want to encourage this? Do we want to require this? So that's like the kind of high level question. Next guessing game. What do we think of that? This one. Does anyone know where this place is?
I have the foggiest.
This is the funnest part. This is the second funnest part. So,
No.
okay. So this is Roundabout Books. And I pulled their ZBA because they had to go to Zoning Board of Appeals because based on the equations, they would have needed to require 21 spaces. And I'm not saying it's impossible to have gotten 21 spaces, but I think Raymond said there's 12 currently and asked for 12 and got 12.
It's nuts that they would require 21 spaces for that.
21 feels high, right?
I mean, I
This
think
is-
it gets that much business, but still.
It's formulaic. I mean, I
Yeah.
live near there. Sometimes I see there's a lot of cars there. But also, I mean, there's a lot of turnover. Not everyone's going to hang out. Street parking is always an option. Not always. There are some places where in front of fire hydrants, right in front of stop signs. But it is an option, particularly when you're thinking about overflow and like how much do you need to build, and then we have these public rights of way. They may have multiple purposes that are valuable. So last fun one. Anyone want a hint? That's the train tracks above it.
Yeah.
And it's by Real Pickles. Yeah, you could see, these are GTB buildings once upon a time, and you could see GTB, all the GTB buildings from there. So this is King's Gym. Yeah. So the gym that they use is the building on the left. This is Box Shop Road. The boxes for the tap and die sets. I don't know if anyone's hung around with them. Okay, so
that one because I think they're neat.
they're neat. They're not like little jinky cardboard boxes.
No,
They're like cool little like
They're
they're
made of wood.
yeah they're cool boxes. Like I like it. So they made them there. That Box Shop Road for the boxes. And we have a lot of this old like these old buildings, and coming up with ways to reuse them and redevelop them is like kind of like I think a good thing. If they were to abide by the parking requirements, so the building on the left is where the gym is. The building on the right is basically storage, more or less. I don't know if that's more manufacturing, and I don't know if they know 100%. Well, anyway, I'll leave that to Sean and Robin. They're not here. But I did ask them. Their stuff I didn't have ZBA stuff on because it's older, and I wasn't going to ask for what's the thing where you have to ask.
Public records request.
Yeah, it just felt like a little bit of work. So I'm taking Sean at kind of his word. He said the original thing is that if they were going to provide enough parking based on what they needed, based on how do you even evaluate a gym and how much space it needs, they would have had to tear down the building.
Oh, wow.
They would have had to tear down the other building to like sort of pave over enough parking to hit their requirement needs.
Their legal requirement means you're saying.
Yeah, even that it was sort of speculative because it's like, I don't think a gym is actually one of the uses. So it became like, how many seats are there? So they were kind of like looking at the benches and like, I don't. So this is all through the pipeline. So I'm going to put that as the most sort of speculative revision of like what the case was. But we'll say this from the horse's mouth. They said they don't mind if I use, they've thought about expanding the facility, adding some outdoor areas. This would actually open up like some things because they're special permitted a little bit now. So now they might have to reconsider the parking because they add a backyard training area, which does seem a little peculiar for the parking at least. I'm only talking about parking, but
Do you have a sense in how much it
Yeah.
costs somebody to build a parking spot?
there's numbers that have floated around in different places. I don't have a number like that with me, because I think the ones that I saw were kind of LA in the 2000s,
Okay. So
which might be right where we are right now.
Maybe, honestly. and-
Yeah, but there's definitely an economic, there's just like a cost because you either have to buy more land.
Right.
Or you have to, one, you might just have to buy more land. And if your development can justify it, then you sometimes do crazy stuff like do underground and above ground parking. That gets super, super expensive. But that's why the LA one is weird because they do a lot of like,
Yeah, we do.
yeah, like,
First story parking.
yeah, so it's a hard comp. But it's not nothing. I have seen numbers. I don't like saying stuff that I'm just saying, but I've seen numbers that look like rents might go up $100 or $200 from some time period if you are basically building that into like the thing over like the pro forma development. Like, what does that basically mean to build it? And then I don't know, like I don't know how someone's analyzing that exactly because there's ways you can do it. You can like assess land value. Like I could see models, but like all of them are going to have limitations. You're
So
going
the
to,
basic assertion is economic drag on this business particular because they want to expand and make some more.
on this point, yeah. Some places love parking. Like,
Right.
if you're a superstore, you want people to come in and buy as much stuff. Like you kind of don't want walkers. I hear Whole Foods is guilty of this.
Interesting.
Yeah, like they want people to come and fill up their carts and
Sure.
so
Costco.
yeah, there's a little bit of like there are some places that will probably like will be way over perhaps. They're not just building the minimum. They might have a number in their head from this is what we do.
Home Depot.
Yeah. So, but the basic point is space for parking cannot be used otherwise. All right, at a geometric point, what do you think about the impacts of all that hard top surface stuff on like the environment? I have some suggestions here,
This
but
is exactly what I was immediately thinking about.
Yeah.
Like they're impermeable surfaces. We already have flooding problems, particularly in, really populated areas. We don't want more flooding problems.
Yeah.
The more asphalt we have, the worse that's going to be.
yeah,
I actually remember during the parking study presentation, they talked about how water runoff could be an issue that you might want to regulate to try to reduce parking if you are concerned about it.
yeah. Speaking specifically
Right.
to that one, so North Carolina, I don't know if the governor's passed it, but I believe the legislature's recently just approved, kind of in a similar situation. They've, I believe, preempted in most of North Carolina parking minimums so that you can't have them. There's some sections where they say, I think you can have them, but they're like politically, they're like, you guys sort it out or something. And the Catawba River Keeper, they're kind of like their Connecticut River Valley Association, their Deerfield watershed folks, is like the whole thing is like a parking lot / stormwater reform. And their motivation is like, and their motivation there is that, hey, they're preempting the minimums and saying you can't have them in your town, sorry. And they're also saying, hey, we're giving local municipalities the power to start doing stuff to help mitigate it. So there is like there is a model from North Carolina. This is like the type of stuff where people again want to get into. I think we'd have to petition like that. That'd be a legislator petition thing. That would have to be getting multiple communities that feel this way to go that way.
And just contextually, if I'm right about this, Catawba County is in Western North Carolina. So like Hurricane Helene is
Yeah.
what they're thinking about, I'm sure, because like the massive floods that happened
Yeah.
a year and a half ago or whatever with Hurricane Helene was partly because like the water had nowhere to go.
Yeah.
It's an area of high growth. There's lots of new development, meaning lots of new impermeable surfaces that weren't there before, changing kind of the nature.
Right. I mean, it certainly wasn't the only reason,
Right,
but
right.
like anything they can possibly do to reduce their flood risk, I think they're very, very conscious of.
Yeah. Like there's a climate change going to cause more things because no matter what. at this point.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I was actually just at a conference with someone from Asheville and she said, was talking about how they got 32 inches of rain in 48 hours.
Yeah.
Like, it's unimaginable.
Yeah.
So, and like, that could happen here. You
Yeah.
know, like we have to be conscious of that.
I could skip to different, like now at this point, I just have different slides that kind of touch on different themes about what is maybe the room just sort of think of.
I think we're moving through at a pretty good clip. I don't know how the rest of the committee feels.
And
Good question.
I mean, I guess my sort of bigger picture question here is like, what is our goal tonight? Obviously, it's just to discuss, but like, is there a place that you would like this conversation to get to tonight?
Personally, I want to give Michael a chance to kind of talk about the idea and for us to look at this and just kind of get the temperature of the committee about how we feel about the idea of eliminating them or putting in maximums potentially. So that's really what I would hope is just to get a temperature check.
Great.
You know.
Thank you. That's helpful.
I would be curious to hear more about your specific suggestions for the revisions. Like, do you have because
Yeah.
like I'm very sympathetic to we don't need excessive parking. I mean, I didn't have a car from 2001, 2021. But in this town, in this region, people have cars. And so I would be interested in finding that balance between how much parking do we really need but how much do we need to provide so that people have a place to park the cars that they do have?
Yeah.
Because unfortunately, transit is not most people's primary
Yeah.
form of transportation. And I mean, I would love to ride my bike everywhere, but I don't. So that's a question I'm interested in. How do we make sure that we provide adequate amount of parking, make good use of the parking we have, maybe look at the parking that is excessive that we could consider turning into other uses, but still meet like
Yeah.
realistic
Yeah.
needs.
If I can tack on a corollary question
Please.
to that, I'm curious if you know anything about this, like how much that's a problem that the market solves kind of on its own. Because like if you build, like developers aren't going to build something that is less attractive because a lot of people who are going to want to, live there or work there, or whatever, are like, that looks great, but I need parking and you don't have it, so I'm going to go somewhere else, right? Like it does seem like something that, like, because no minimums doesn't mean no parking,
Right.
obviously.
That-
So like, I'm curious.
That's right. One side of my mouth you want me to talk out of right there. Like if I'm talking about maximums and like continuing like models for constraints, then I don't really like that's where I kind of suggest like I don't really have an answer to that. And I don't know how to set that line. It does seem like eliminating minimums doesn't and on and of itself does not eliminate parking. Almost like pretty well established that it definitely doesn't do that. A lot of, and so if you're the type of person who thinks, we'll get rid of the minimum requirements and then all the parking will just disappear, that doesn't happen.
Whether you
So-
want it to.
Whether you wanted to or not, that just doesn't happen. If I was just to speak to like two reasons for it, one is that a lot of the infrastructure already exists. And so even if someone buys a building to reuse or adapt it, they just take the asphalt that's there and say, okay. And they might not make a choice much more outside of that. Some of that is aggregate data. So if you say, well, if a lot of development is big box development, for example, then they still provide the parking anyway. So like they weren't going to do it. At a financing level, if you start just doing like if you're like, I want to build, unless you're doing something super small scale, like you're taking your own one property and adding another unit, then you're probably looking at like kind of like, say big boy financing, but I keep saying we're big boy financing. Like, so your development is so pro forma driven that like you're going to say like, I'm going to build like this brand new development, like single family stuff. And I'm not going to provide a parking space. Like you better be in the hot, like the most, like such a high demand neighborhood to like get away with pulling that off. Otherwise, like it's, you probably like, you won't get the financing to not do it. Like they're just going to be like, well, how are you're going to build this new thing? So someone's going to pay 2,000, 2,250 for rent and they're not going to have a parking spot for them. In some places, that's okay. You're in like a dense enough, urban enough neighborhood where like you might be able to sell that. There might be sort of options like in the area. But if you're, I mean, I'll just pull out like the current project that Penfield's doing on Silver Street. I would be surprised if they're doing less than one. Well, they have to be doing one, but they probably do. I would bet they're doing more. Yeah, because that's based on where you're living. Most of it's just like your developers kind of like aren't going to build. You're not going to put that much money into something and take the down risk. Commercials, I think, where it's always a little more interesting. Again, if you're super standard, we kind of already know what someone's going to do. When you're doing the kind of, I guess, the scrappy infill, like creative reuse stuff, like I guess that's where I feel like that if you said, where's the harm in parking minimums in Greenfield, one per unit? I asked the Northampton developer today and she's like, one per unit is fine. I was like, it's fine. I could do that. Anything I want to do, I can do. She doesn't necessarily do it as small as I'm thinking of, like going from 3 to 4. Although she's like, there's so many things that come in with that. Usually you can find a way to make it work. If you're going from, if you're doing commercial stuff and we kind of look at our examples, it does look a little weird. So that's like my overall read on it. Like I'm trying to, I had a conversation with her and she's like, like, it's kind of like, sounds like an interesting idea, but like, I don't know, it seems like a lot of time. You should be doing something. She was like, she was into side setback requirements. Like, so
That's a valid conversation.
So like, there's other stuff, but I guess if I know, I can speak to parking. I can imagine side setback conversations being another thing, but this, I don't know. I'll visit more. I don't know what to say about it.
Something I'd be interested in seeing if we can see this discussion. Are there examples of places that have taken this, like North Carolina? Do you have something in the slideshow about that?
Sorry, yeah, there's actually, I totally, like, there's something I really want to show there. We did talk about vehicle access and parking and providing it. There are two interesting maybe considerations though, to like maybe challenge some of that premise that there was in that question. I'm gonna see if I could like spill out like a theme here. So what does this one do? Activity density, automobile mode shares, the relationship between automobile mode share. That's good. That's getting too ahead. There's a little bit of a study on what happens when you provide parking? And it seems like there was the example from a 21 San Francisco affordable housing lottery. So they basically were randomized and some people got in affordable housing units that provided parking and some didn't provide off-street parking. And what ended up happening is that the households that got in places that didn't have parking ended up not getting cars. So there is a certain macro behavioral shift where if I could like sort of outline it this way, when you do build stuff, when you like sort of require building stuff for cars, you end up, you don't, it's not auto oriented, it's auto dependent. Like you actually start making places where just, again, this is just that the space eating like thing that happens with providing parking. You actually make it where walking or biking becomes harder, less pleasant, less desirable. It does seem to actually sort of like affect the ecosystem in a certain feedback loop that's a little peculiar.
Could you say a good example of that is west of 91 on the Rotary versus downtown Greenfield?
So our local example, like, this is from the map from the bike study, but they're pulling census data. These are based on census data, households in these census tracts without vehicle access. So we have chunks of Greenfield where a quarter of the households, plus or minus, like, I think it was like 100 or so. Well, at the 15% level, I looked at the census data just to kind of confirm this. And it's like 15% plus or minus 200 households But also I feel like if you don't have access to a vehicle and then does anyone like almost had access to a car, but it breaks all the time? It's like not reliable. Like, I don't know what that next like spot is that you answer to. But like there's like this kind of like there's this like macro question of like, we build the parking, we make more auto dependency, we kind of ultimately make affordability more of a problem because now everyone has to have a car to do things. Like there is a level of that feedback loop that, you know, is it as far as we have to come up with ways to like get rid of all of the parking, but like there's like a long-term vision. I think there might be value in finding ways to minimize it. So like, I understand that like, stuff like there's just like, well, where am I going to park? But the other side of it is like all that parking provision isn't helping these houses as far as I can tell. So that's a little bit touching on like the sort of like equity and fairness issue of like, I have a motorcycle. I don't have a little shed with a little shop where I could keep my motorcycle all the time. It had to be built there when I bought my house or something like that. Or if we required auto insurance to be bundled into our home insurance. So every renter landlord had auto insurance for all the cars that like, it would kind of,
that's actually a great,
it would make everything really weird.
Right.
And I'm just like, this is where like my market face is just like, yeah, just let it. If people want it, they can pay for it. If they don't pay for it, then the behavior systematically might change in different ways, but we're definitely skewing people's, you know, everything has a consequence.
right.
It's a regulatory subsidy for that choice in a sense. Like,
Yeah.
subsidy is the wrong word. It's not money, but it's encouraged.
But it has a cost.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and again, like, we're not talking about forcing anyone to decrease the parking that's currently available on Greenfield, right? So like,
No, yeah. Like if this
there's still gonna be
conversation,
plenty of, like, there's plenty of parking right now. Would still be plenty of parking. It's more of just like not requiring that we build even more of it when we, you know, already have a lot.
yeah, if that's the read of the room, like, and which kind of like, maybe that's. the
I
read
mean,
of
we
the
could
room.
have a different conversation about reducing.
Reducing it, but like I said, I don't know if there's actually anything to do right now about that.
Right.
So it's kind of,
Right.
it's not a moot point, but it's like for the future,
Yeah.
maybe.
Well, in most of the city, you can build a parking lot as a permitted use anyway. You know, it's like as a separate,
Right. If you want to do it.
you know, you're allowed to. You know, it's not like getting rid of parking minimums prohibits you from building that. You know, it's like even standalone as a for-profit thing. Like, look at all these houses without parking. I can make a boatload, you know, by selling it to them with my land next door. Like,
Yeah.
it's still that market choice.
Yeah. Yeah, and like more radical example socially, I believe in Japan, kind of like we have with insurance to register your car, you have to have insurance to get your car registered. You actually have to demonstrate that you have an off-street place to park your car. And it's like a different side of the land use thing where it's like they're putting the cost on the vehicle owner, which is like fair. That might be more fair. I'm not sure, but it definitely puts the whole cost on that person. Are there edge cases? Of course, we live in a rural area, so we have a lot of people that need vehicles, but also like are generally probably less economically well off than like in some other communities in the area. So I'd be a little hesitant to like sort of like turn all the parking lots into trees, but like if like a quarter of them did, that might be nice. I don't know. And you know, there's costs. You know, I don't want to hurt one poor economically off group and like to help another one.
Right.
I don't know. There's definitely a balance there. The sustainability question of like finding that way to. Sorry, I've been talking too much. Anyone have a comment about something?
I have just a question as someone who's fairly new to council and how this works. So is this like, what would the next step be? Would this be, we would send it to the planning department to say, do some research, come up with an ordinance that we can look at that's like evidence-based and best practice-based? Is that how this usually works? Or
Yes. So basically, like, a group of citizens can initiate a zoning change. You know, you have 10 people sign a petition. That's one way it can happen. They can write it all out themselves. The city council as a body can say, hey, we want to send this through the zoning process, which involves a public hearing with the planning board, like we did the other month with the height restriction piece, or the planning board themselves can initiate it. And then we do the same joint public hearing. There's always going to have to be a joint public hearing. Both EDC and planning board will have to talk about it in a public hearing that's posted We could, if we wished, take what we have in front of us and say, we recommend to the full council that we initiate the zoning process, and then off it goes. Or we could ask Mr. Mullen, hey, could you address these and that concerns and come back to us? Or, hey, you could go talk to the planning board and get their perspective on it. At this point, this is just a discussion on something, the clock hasn't started ticking. Because as soon as you initiate the zoning process, I believe you have to have a public hearing within 21 days. And then after that public hearing, you have to act on it. We have to start the whole process within either 60 or 90. I can't remember specifically. But basically, as soon as you say, yes, we want to do this, a clock starts ticking and you have to start moving on it, and it has to be posted in the paper and all that. So we have every option right now because we haven't said we want to initiate this, and he hasn't collected 10 signatures to initiate this. But it could go, really at any point.
You could sandbag everything by collecting 10 signatures to some evil genius approach. Anyway.
And actually, if
Yeah.
it fails, it can't come back in a substantially the same form within 2 years. So that's unless the planning board recommends it, and then it can come back. Again, it's arcane.
There's levels.
Yeah,
Is that a Massachusetts thing or is it a Greenfield thing?
that's a Massachusetts thing.
Weird.
It is.
Cool. My general, this is high level. If I'm happy to continue some volunteer work, I understand that being on city council requires that you have to volunteer a lot of your time already. So if someone wants to kind of get into the weeds on the text, happy to go in that direction. If I'm also just punt it to the city council, to members to go on with yourself, happy to go to the planning board and kind of see what they say. They might be more eggheady about this stuff.
That's probably likely.
Yeah, so I kind of thought this
Bless them for it.
for the record, if they're listening. So I guess that was my approach or my thought. John kind of gave me that outline of they're both in these bodies and they kind of both have to walk a little bit in lockstep, and then something happens. Then it might become a real thing.
Right.
I'm just a
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of communities still have really outdated parking requirements, and certainly to the extent that parking requirements could inhibit redevelopment, redevelopment in Greenfield, yeah, I think it's a great idea to move in this direction, make sure that we're accounting for, it would be nice to get more data on how the marketplace work things out in places that have eliminated their parking requirements. I'll look at some
Especially
case
places that are
studies.
similar to Greenfield.
Yeah.
Geographically.
yeah.
Yeah, again, because I know in some places, very anecdotally in
Yeah.
San Diego, they were trying, even in a place like San Diego that has pretty good transit in the downtown area, they tried eliminating parking and ran into some issues where developers weren't requiring parking, and there were problems. So just keeping in mind, I know that this is very different, but that
Yeah.
we don't have transit, people do rely on cars.
Yeah.
Hopefully the market would recognize that, and development would still have
Yeah.
reasonable amounts of parking. I know roundabout books, I have had days where I'm like, wow, I can barely get down
Yeah. Yeah.
Pierce because there's cars lining both sides of the street.
Mhm.
That only happens very rarely, but
Yeah. Yeah.
but yeah, in general, I'm in favor of some things that would open up redevelopment options. Get rid of drag on development, make housing easier to provide, because to your point, it does
Yeah.
add to the costs of housing.
Yeah.
But in a way that accounts for the reality that people will have cars.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and that's how much, this is where you might have some area, but of prior knowledge on a lot of this stuff already. If anyone's there's links, this thing was going to be out for the slideshow, but most of the resources that I'm kind of drawing from our Parking Reform Network kind of has their map. Again, it's not 100% accurate. Greenfield did parking reform in the 2000s when we eliminated requirements in the downtown commercial district. It's not on that. So again, but we could kind of start saying what's some stuff in New England, and kind of start looking at comps and kind of seeing what that looks like. And if that's the approach, San Diego is definitely such a different market that it's hard to say. You know, I don't know if San Diego has a lot of neighborhoods that are 25% don't have access to a vehicle necessarily. So like kind of like just wonder like if you have a lot of sort of affluent multi-car house properties, what does that sort of do?
San Diego.
Yeah, and sometimes there's management stuff. Like I've heard this in, I believe, Boston and Cambridge and like Somerville, they all kind of have different policies where maybe they give out a lot of street parking permits. Like, so you can kind of like eliminate requirements, but also like not drop the ball in other areas. And you can kind of like create a problem. And it's like, is this the parking requirements or is this that we're not maybe charging for super high demand street parking in any way, and actually giving out a bunch of free spaces to households and anyone who wants them. And so like you're kind of just sort of passing the buck to another part of your infrastructure, maybe. Yeah.
Do you have more slides or?
I don't think I have more slides. I think they're like there's some stuff we could look at, kind of depending on where the conversation goes.
Wow.
There's a whole series that's online. They're all very sad.
They're all really sad. So this is hard for the city where the streets are paved with gold. I believe that's what it's saying.
It was the richest city in the country.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Greenfield once upon a time had more banks per capita than anywhere else in the United States. We were really booming 19th century. Yeah. Yeah. Those were the real good old days. Everyone thinks about the times they remember.
Before the armory shut down, it was a different animal.
But there's definitely there was an argument there that I sort of touched up on. Parking is one leg of building for auto orientation that I believe actually causes auto dependency. Because it's actually just compromised like your place, like which one of these is like a more sustainable, more sort of robust community. You know, there's plenty of reasons someone could say, would you rather be born in 1934 or 2019? Where I'm like, I don't know about all of that, but like, there's a little bit of like, you know, what if maybe we didn't sort of do what we've done to some of these places. And so there's a little bit, there's something there that I'll, yeah, this kind of is a chart that somewhat sort of speaks to economic. It's like a crude metric. They describe activity as like people, residents and jobs per place. And then they're looking at like sort of just suggesting that like a denser build and you sort of lose density by being auto oriented ends up just making places like flatter. That make like it's just like there's less to do, there's less vibrancy, there's less vitality. The metrics itself that they're using are really, really crude, but they're kind of trying, like, it's a hard thing to measure. What does that mean to say, like, this neighborhood feels really vibrant and this one doesn't? So if you like crude but interesting measures. But that's where there's a whole lot of stuff there. The UCLA Center for Parking Policy, somewhere in the packet, I think there's a link if you're on the digital version to a synthesis of like the literature on sort of parking reform, I think specifically hitting on mandates and minimum requirements. There's a lot. There's like a lot. And I'll spend a lot of time kind of going like, oh, this paper's interesting, but also it maybe suggests something else. How do you interpret it? What does one paper mean? But I don't know if there's a big body of literature out there that's actually saying the opposite. Like there's people that say it, but like I don't know. There's not, I don't, as far as I understand, there's not really a lot of evidence suggesting that like in like a robust way. So,
And there is definitely an evidence base about people overestimating their need for parking. Like there's actually a lot of evidence.
yeah, like I maybe say I have had a Kool-Aid for a long time, so like sometimes it's a little hard for me to see outside of it. But like, yeah.
I do think that's actually an important point, though, because we live, you know, as Councilor Gilman was saying, in a place without great public transit. And people here are going to hear the phrase eliminating parking minimums. They're going to think, and I don't want to put words in people's mouths, but you're going to eliminate parking. And then where will I park? And that's going to be, you know, a concern.
Yeah.
And so I think, you know, as we continue this conversation, the case studies that are kind of outlined on this map will be really helpful to even discuss as a group, but also for members of the public to kind of who haven't drank Kool-Aid.
Yes.
And, you know, this is something I've also spent a lot of time thinking about and reading about. And frankly, it's actually one of the reasons I ran for council is deeply concerned about parking minimums because I am a gigantic dork as well. And I say that as a compliment. But again, it's easy to get lost in the sauce on this sort of thing, especially when it's the reality of life. And I really, how do you get the public transit? You can't justify it unless people are going to take it, and they're not going to take it unless it gets to places it needs to go. Can't get to places it needs to go if everything is a subdivision and nobody lives in walking distance of anything, right? So it's kind of a chicken and egg situation as far as land use is concerned. So I'm glad we're having this conversation. I think just for myself, I would really love to see some success stories. So if we're going to try something like this, it will make people, and frankly, everybody, I think, at this table feel more confident about it if we can say, like, look, I know Minneapolis eliminated parking minimums. How did that go? It's been a couple of years now. What's been the changes? Different animal. We're not San Diego, nor are we Minneapolis. But I'd be curious, in an area where it has winters, like what does it look like to do something like this? So I think getting essentially Quesadillas' arguments would be helpful. So I'm glad this map is here because it feels like it's a good way to access this pretty quickly. But I would love to see some of those. I don't know if there's anything else folks would be interested in.
Yeah, one of my things that I was wondering is, are there towns/cities with a population of around 20-25,000 that have done this, that, are kind of dealing with some of those weather patterns and stuff like that?
Yeah.
Another thing that there's two things that I love the idea of replacing parking lots with like trees. I would love to see that. My two things that I'm concerned about with something like this is, one, our elderly population, how it's growing. And two, which kind of compounds that, is our lack of a real public transit system. So many folks don't necessarily own a car of their own, but are relying on their neighbors, their friends and family. Because you just think about it, like from here to the hospital, or like from here to like the police station, or from here to like Stop and Shop, like it's near impossible. If you can afford to have a car in Greenfield, you're most definitely going to. Does that mean people don't bike? They obviously do. But my only thing is, I'm not one to trust the market. I'm not very I don't really like the idea of just throwing it up to developers and the market in general, because I think about it and I'm like, okay, if I had a property and instead of a parking spot, I can cram in another like apartment there, I'm most definitely going to, like, if I'm thinking of money, I'm most definitely going to cram in another apartment if there's no like restraints on me. And so I'm a little hesitant because of that. And I think it would be really nice if we could have an alternative to cars in a real meaningful way with a rail car system. I had talked to the mayor like a while back, I think before the election even, about potentially having some kind of, at least a system just on Main Street alone. If we could just have a car that just goes, a bus or a golf cart or something that just goes up and down to help people, or something that goes with from the parking garage up and down Main Street. And it was just like, oh, we don't have this money. It takes a lot of time,
Yeah.
And I mean, I get that, but I think if you're going to propose stuff like this, we have to have alternatives for people to get around because of just the way that we're shaped here in Greenfield. And people don't necessarily, I mean, like, I like to bike, it's fun, but a lot of elderly folks can't necessarily do that. I think the idea of potentially making, so is there like a special permit, like a parking waiver that a development can apply for? Like if there is one, can we make it easier? If there isn't one, can we potentially legislate to make that happen? I would maybe like to go towards that direction rather than like none at all. Although I did see like a while back, I did see like a reel on Instagram or something, this place in like Scandinavia where they did away with street lights and stuff. and they thought like everybody was gonna crash into each other and like, everybody was gonna die. And actually it worked out well. Like somehow
Yeah.
people started moving like bees and they were like pretty efficient.
Yeah.
And so
It's a Dutch planning term. It's
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm like, maybe something miraculous like that could happen where people would just like don't need cards like that anymore.
Mhm.
But also like, yeah, again, just for the public, because John, I think you brought it up, like this is not like, oh, we're doing away with all parking spaces, even if this would to
Even if we got rid of the
like
requirement.
I'm particularly not in favor of something like this in the way that it is to just blanket carte blanche, just do away with any requirements. Maybe there's things that we can tweak where we don't require as much for spaces.
Yeah. Like I said, you start looking at some of the commercial uses and some of those numbers seem really peculiar. Does anyone have it in front of them? The revised text? I mean, I could pull it up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I believe like congregant housing like needs more parking than hotels.
Medical facilities are pretty out
Some
of.
of it's just like, you're like, what, like, I like, and this is that side that I didn't get into, but like the sort of like the evidence basis for the requirements themselves is like super dubious.
Yeah.
So there is like a degree to which like someone can kind of like, you can really like, we need to take all the fat of our cooking? No, but like we could really like cut down on like a lot and it would be a meaningful reform and it would, so like I think that there's like sort of like a lot of options. Personally, I think as John kind of spoke to this kind of broader conversation, I feel like sometimes parking reform happens in municipalities where one case that I heard of, I have to track down who told it to me. There was someone in the parking reform network. It was like a municipality and the planning board was like, all we do is just approve parking variances. Like, so let's just not have them. Because that's just like more people that come to the meet. Like, it's just like kind of like, it just takes time. It's like a month delay for everyone at best, sometimes longer because things get canceled. And it's just like, so there wasn't even a public conversation. It was like the planning director was like, you should get rid of them. And then, like, just because like they seem to be taking up all my time and I don't want to be like hanging out at 6:30 on a Tuesday if I don't have to. I haven't written it. I mean, I have a draft of a letter in the recorder. I kind of think that there's reason in our community to kind of actually just have a broader conversation around some of these things. And so if anyone else wants to help or has their own thing to say, maybe there's a merit of actually just kind of slowing in and talking. And it looks like someone's trying to chat.
They can't, so.
Oh, okay. All right. So I kind of am a little more of like I'd rather have a slow, long, awkward conversation and then like I don't know, right? You could politically guess, anyone could get something that they want and maybe it slides through and they go, cool, that was great. But like, I don't know. I think that there's like a requirement's like the only parking problem that we have in Greenfield. And I think we might have to just get better about talking about something here to kind of, I think it's worthwhile. So I'm partial to like slow conversations. In my head.
When is the proposed Main Street revitalization plan supposed to like come to?
I heard next year is the first year where there's capital funding actually allocated again. Because it was going to be, I want to say last year it was supposed to, then the state pushed it back. So I believe it's fiscal year 2027 is but that's design. So like, I don't think there's going to be any concrete board, even if it goes through until 28, 29, 28, 30.
So I'd like to see what the impact of reducing the parking on Main Street is going to have, like in reality, and how the public sentiment is versus like actually practically what does that do to traffic or the businesses there and accessibility? Because I think I want to be optimistic and be like, oh, like, yes, more green space because I would love to have more requirements for green space instead of parking. But I think when it comes down to it, I'm concerned about like mobility for people who aren't physically mobile.
Yeah.
To be able to walk or
Mhm. Yeah. And
with the absence specifically of no no like transit system.
Yeah.
They can just hop on to.
Yeah.
If that was like bustling, I'd be like, yeah, no shit,
Yeah.
why do you, that's just a luxury. But
No, yeah.
for the vast majority of people there, it's genuinely like they cannot get their medication, go to their doctors without a car here in Greenfield.
Yeah.
Something, just in Councilor Minhas, what he just said kind of reminded me of the conversation I had with one of our residents about handicap parking, and how that could be, are there any examples of cities that have eliminated parking minimums but kept some requirements for handicap parking for those folks with limited mobility? So to ensure that those kind of uses, commercial spaces are always accessible. Like every commercial space has to have at least one handicap spot in whatever area, or something along those lines. Might be a way to kind of deal with some of those issues.
Well, if you have a decal, you can park for free at any
In any spot.
spot. I mean,
Yeah.
which there are obviously like, it takes a little.
Now you
bit
gotta
to
have-
a decal. Right,
If we're having a conversation. with the
right. But I think it's an
Yeah.
interesting question.
Yeah. I've said on the record at the parking and traffic meetings that if we actually charge more for the meters, then there'd be more space, like in the high value spaces, the ones that are always there, and they'd be available. And then if you are someone who has a decal, that spot's actually open for you. If there's no spot open for you, then like, nice that you have a decal, but like kind of,
Right,
there's also marginal users that maybe don't have a decal, but they do have certain limitations.
Definitely.
So it's not like there are sort of revenue things you could kind of get into, like should our parking structure like system like break even? Should it run at a loss? Is it supposed to be like their magic sort? I don't think it makes money. So there's like you're just trying to manage that space. Like if you're just using money to like allocate demand so that people who want it take it, and if like a lot of people, able-bodied people, are taking up prime real estate when they could park just a little bit further, and maybe they would if it cost just a little bit more. That can sometimes manage that, and it is speaking to a little bit of like you could redesign the street, but if your pricing isn't right, you could end up having like a system that feels broken on both ends. So that's like there is that little bit there. To your point, Wahab, there's definitely like I always think of marginal users, like there's some folks who you bike sometimes.
Not enough.
Not enough. I'm trying to bike a lot, especially in summer and stuff. But I even bike some snow. But you might bike a little bit more if you were like, man, I want to pay to park. It's expensive. Like not like just enough to make you go, I'm not sure. There's maybe some folks who go, I'm going to drive, but I'll park a little bit further away because there's a little bit of a cheaper spot.
I like the idea of racing prices on folks. I hate that.
Yeah. But we under like
They're already
owning
started,
it's usually these aren't, I don't know how much you spend on your car, but it's probably the amount you spend on parking is probably
yeah.
like, that's not the, if someone is throwing away
But
lots
it's
of
like
money.
they don't have the money. They might not have the money for it at the moment, and then they get a ticket, and the ticket leads to something else, and then it compounds. And then there's a whole other thing to deal with on top of
Yeah.
the affordability.
Yeah. But you're just trying to there's users that aren't always able to park or able to get places because of that. And we do have the FERDA buses. I don't know how that's funded, but I mean, I have a friend who's up at what used to be the ONC Rehab Center. And I sometimes accompany our medical boy like trips and stuff. And I used to drive her around. I used to do errands for her so she didn't leave. So picking up the prescriptions. So there is a little bit there, like how much of it, some of our seniors can't drive, so that the parking availability doesn't necessarily help them. Anyone who doesn't have a driver's license can't drive. Usually they're shorter than some of the people in this room. They're children, right? Like they are, all of this infrastructure, like isn't built. There's some people that it's not built for that we're kind of excluding today to prioritize someone else. But I like I said, there's reasons maybe to move this needle from where we are, which relative to other places is relatively low requirements for residential. Kind of weird ones across some other commercial areas. And I think a bigger conversation about that is valuable. So it comes back to the sustainability one. Where do we think we want to be in 2 decades, 3 decades? Like, I don't know if this is the type of stuff that's going to change anyone's life tomorrow, but it might make a difference about what Greenfield looks like, say 2050.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but parking requirements have only been around, I mean, they can't be newer than the 1920s, right? Like the automobile was.
Do you want the Greenfield answer?
Yes, I do.
I don't have it, but I was trying.
Please, me. Like, it's
So,
so
if
exciting.
anyone else wants to do a stupid, what was my expense time? So I've been at the library going through old reporter articles because I was thinking about pulling up our zoning ordinances, but then you have to ask for a request. And if you just say, show me when zoning first came a thing, that's a big thing to look through. I don't know. Ugh. So you need to be precise. It'd be nice if you could say it. So I'm reading the recorder, every single recorder going back from, I just got lucky. I randomly picked up something. It seems like post World War II, they mentioned that they started trying to implement zoning. Massachusetts allowed it, MGL 40A, I believe. I might have number wrong. Allowed it in the 20s, but like Greenfield didn't implement it. There was a quote, not a quote, but the reporter themselves says, we tried doing it in the 30s, but everyone felt it was too complicated. So
They're not wrong.
I'm just saying that was the attitude. There's maybe a little bit of a rebellious spirit of so
That newfangled zone.
Well, and our current zoning code is from 1989.
Yeah.
So somewhere between post World War, it sounds like they started trying to come up with some types of zoning ordinances.
Yeah.
And when parking, so I don't have that whole story yet. And give me enough time and I might have an answer. I hope that's not like a condition of conversation continuing.
No, but
Unless you want to join me, I'll send you my notes so you could read the next day's report with the microfilm and we could get.
both don't have time.
So what I'm kind of hearing from the group is that we have a desire to see some case studies.
Yeah.
Is there any further guidance that we can give, Michael, if you're willing to do this, about the kinds of questions we want answered by those case studies? I think,
Yeah.
access for the elderly is a really key and important one that Councilor Minhas brought up, especially considering our demographics. That's the first one that comes to mind. And I guess just some examples of cities that have successfully done it, something I would like to see. And I think that's kind of,
That are, similar to
comparable.
Greenfield, comparable.
Right.
And impact on housing and economic development in general. If
Yeah.
there's data on that.
commercial also, like, does it
Right.
help with commercial development, what kind of places?
Mhm. Yeah. I think there's some, helping, boon for commerce. And do you want me to try to keep it to things related to looking at removing parking minimums? Because sometimes there's also things like what I was speaking to of you might see a street that had 100 parking spots, now it has 24 because of some redesign. That's more radical than eliminating requirements, but you might also say what's the effect of that on that neighborhood? Is that or should we kind of stay more in the?
I mean, I'm very interested.
Because I can start pulling stuff, but I don't want to start throwing a bunch of papers at people
And let's fix, I would be inclined to keep it to removing parking minimums, just so we keep it focused, because what's in front of us.
Yeah.
Although that question needs to be answered, the Main Street redesign, that is going to be a question the community needs to talk about.
Right.
So I think long-term, that's one that we should put a pin into, because
Yes, we, I think, as in probably this committee, but not necessarily you in terms of.
No, I understand. Yeah.
Mhm.
And if you don't want to invite me back, you don't have to.
I am.
If you want to invite me back and give me homework, like I said, I understand everyone's on volunteer time, so I don't have to come to. I don't have to come to all of them. So
I super appreciate your deep dive nerdiness on this.
Yeah.
It is excellent and super helpful and very impressive.
thank you.
Are folks inclined to send them home with some homework and have them come back next month to discuss some of these case studies?
Yeah, next month or whenever.
Whenever you can.
I'll look at your schedule and look at my schedule, and we'll see if it can happen next month. And if it doesn't, we'll go after. Maybe homework in there. So I'll try to get an op-ed in the reporter, and we can kind of I think it's a good chance for everyone to talk to maybe constituents or hear what people have to say too. And
Speaking of the recording.
I'm not in a rush.
And as far as having a conversation with the community, we have as the city council the ability to have public forums. And that's something we could certainly consider before we implement this, is inviting the public, yourself and, many members of this committee to do a public forum where people can have this kind of dialogue, because I think it would be really helpful.
Right.
If that's something you're interested in.
I think the GBA expressed interest in doing something.
I just have a super historian friendly tip for you.
Yeah.
Newspapers.com.
Oh, really?
way faster than going through all the film at the library.
Isn't it romantic, but okay. Yeah.
It's just
So
fascinating.
that it has the recorder
Yeah, oh, God, yeah.
for, no,
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
This is the nerdiest.
Is there a control
most
F?
powerful moment I've ever experienced in a city council meeting.
Why?
You literally
We should help it probably.
Yeah.
Keep it going.
All right, so,
For what year, what edition, what town, what state?
I think we got our,
It's free for like a month. That's like $70 a year.
I think we got our kind of marching orders and our plan. We got one more item on the agenda, which is conveniently Councilor Bolduc. Thank you, Mr. Mullen, really appreciate it.
Thank you
Yeah.
everyone for having me.
This is
Love
really
being
great.
here.
By the way, I'm getting my email. You should email.
Well, so Counselor Bullock.
Yeah,
I'll email your counselor email.
please do.
Yeah.
Because I have a board securities fair. That I'm watching there.
Okay, so we can discuss this later, and now, Councilor Bolduc, if you want to join us to talk about possible zoning amendments and or proposed new ordinance, thank you so much.
Thank you.
To ban the development of data centers in the city of Greenfield.
Lord, I was just making another sticker to sell Stagecoach.
Okay, well, if you want to hold off, you can.
Are we also talking about sign regulations tonight?
No, sorry, I should forgot to mention that. Councilor Brown asked me to table it until
Okay.
there's more conversation.
Okay, so. Would anybody be surprised that I have 3 drafts? No, the answer is no. So after the last meeting, I went to the planning board, and they were not receptive to potential changes, to the zoning code. The idea that they had was by and large that the zoning code as is would basically serve as a soft firewall to prevent anything from coming through because special permits would be necessary. And I don't agree. I- more of a thing written out, but essentially what I went back and did was have 3 different proposals that we could consider depending on what direction we want to go in it. And I thought that perhaps the language that I introduced, all 12 pages of it, was a little bit long. So I ended up actually splitting it into 2 different ordinances. So we could there's a couple things that I want to talk about today. So we could consider doing a moratorium, or we could do a 2-step multi-ordinance kind of a deal. And the reason for splitting it up was basically that the original ordinance, as I was going through it, I realized that it was basically trying to answer 2 questions at once. And that by splitting the ordinances, we basically separate the policy question from the implementation question, which is less of our purview. So the first question was, what is a data center and where, if anywhere, does it belong in Greenfield? And I think that that is fundamentally a land use policy decision that the city council is more apt to be determining. And it was answered in that language by the permitting sections. So only really after that answer exists do the next sections become relevant, which is why I split it up. And so the next section obviously dealt with electrical demand, water usage, backup generators, compliance monitoring, and so on. And so those are operational standards that may or may not become relevant depending on the way that the city is going to lean. And so the hope was that by separating the language into 2 separate ordinances, if we do go with that as a full ban, would then split the proposal essentially into a logical progression that kind of mirrors more how traditional planners would think. So you would define the use, decide whether it's allowed, and then determine the conditions under which it's allowed to operate. And so I also think it is an easier conversation. We went down from 12 pages to like 2 or 3 each, which is a lot more easy to digest. And ironically, they were also more flexible. So I think it's more prudent that council makes the decision about whether or not this belongs in Greenfield. And if at some point the city does want to establish performance standards or allow the use under certain circumstances, I feel like the planning board is uniquely positioned with their expertise to be able to weigh in on that. And so I have language that we can then submit to them for consideration. So we could adopt the prohibition in the form of an ordinance, and then the planning board could spend that time doing a regulatory ordinance, and like say in 5 years that Greenfield changes course because conditions have changed and we want to actually allow them, then we have mature framework basically waiting for them to adopt, was kind of my thought. That said, ignore the title, but this is the revision of the language that I gave you last time with the highlighted revisions.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is redundant. and it's much shorter.
Love that.
And I just did this out at work, so I'll just do it with Tammy later. But this is the moratorium. And one of the things that I had recently reconsidered was the length of said moratorium. Initially, I had wanted to do a year, but I realized that, let's say this passes tomorrow, right? Then we're going to be dealing with this, the very end of it, during budget season next year. And so I wanted to avoid basically a bureaucratic bottleneck. So I said, well, what about 6 months? And then 6 months was actually a little bit of a concern for me as well, because a short moratorium basically risks you don't get to build as much of that momentum and consensus. And it also allows a developer who might be wanting to build potential capital to come in, because they'll wait 6 months, but they won't wait like 2-5 years. However, one of the things I wanted to bring up was that if we wait, a long moratorium also risks it literally risks the breakdown of our local authority to do anything about the data centers, because the state level legislation is actively changing by the day. And so it's basically the immediate ban versus a moratorium. It's a developer's clock versus the state clock. And it's basically how fast do we want to implement this decision is what we really need to be thinking of, because I have legislation that we can do both, because I want to be prepared, right? I don't want to dilly-dally. And again, it's just something that I think that I would really advise Greenfield to be proactive about this, especially where Massachusetts has one of the highest electrical rates. And so we generally are kind of undesirable for large data centers. However, we have large bodies of water and the hydropower facilities here that make this area in particular vulnerable to development like this. And not only do we suffer if data centers come in, but the tax base is not there. I actually contacted the assessor's office. It's not going to bring in a ton of money. It's valued at a warehouse price, and their equipment depreciates in value. So we don't get a lot of money. We don't get the economic benefits, and we also ruin the environment, not only for ourselves, but for our neighbors. And so that is irresponsible of us, I think, as a city to take on for the hope of this economic gain. And so basically, with a few minor tweaks, I would say that the moratorium is able to go forward. And there is language here as well. This would be the first of those ordinances, and I'm only bringing the first one forward for consideration until we decide how we're going to do this. But this is the second half of that language with a few minor revisions. And I didn't highlight anything because I'm basically treating it as a brand new ordinance. So this would be the land use classification of data centers. And the next one would be the regulatory use of data centers. So for now, we're doing what our purview is, deciding, do we want this? How do we want to decide if we want this? And so I obviously will give you all digital copies of this, but I do a lot of this printing out at work because I have a printer at work. Fantastic. And but yeah, it's the same thing. One of the things that they share is the definition of a data center, which I think is crucial. I think fundamentally, the data center definition it's literally fundamental. It's like the hinge point of all this legislation. Because a data center, when you think about it, it really is not simply a building. It's not simply a building. It's literally it's infrastructure, city infrastructure that happens to have a roof and maybe 4 walls if we're lucky. And I think fundamentally altering it would weaken the language and basically open the city accidentally to the same kind of, not a data center LLC coming in and being like, well, hot darn, I'm going to build a computer paradise, not a data center. And we really need to not be so specific as to be exclusionary, but to be broad enough to allow us the flexibility, which is why the ordinance language also includes, we defer, does the building inspector have purview? If you go in and you're a small tech developer, are you going to be providing server space for other buildings? Are you going to be producing video games? Are you going to be developing software? What is the purpose of your equipment? It's not just simply, I have 25 servers and we're going to be using this much energy. There's a multifaceted approach that I think needs to be, to be really considered, especially where we're moving additionally into the digital economy and the digital world. But all of our usage combined does not equal, like, social media, TV, video games, streaming. You can say, oh, you're a hypocrite. You watch TikTok. You go on YouTube, you use the internet. All of those industries combined does not equal, it's like $8 trillion. And the amount of investment that they want to make in AI infrastructure, just as an example, is I think about $7 trillion, and that's in debt. So I don't know that they can't be profitable with with that. But I'm digressing a little bit. But essentially, I have these two languages that we could basically propose, and they're fairly straightforward. But I am expecting some criticisms. Like, for example, just on the moratorium piece, section 2G, I recently added, if after the expiration of the 180-day, which again, we can change, period, no revisions or recommendations are forwarded to the Greenfield City Council, then the council may vote to extend the moratorium by no more than 120 days. During this time, the council must use that body of research generated herein in section 2C to propose its own revisions to the zoning code. So in other words, one of us is going to make regulations about this because we can't afford not to. And the invitation is like, the planning board is more than welcome to participate. But basically, I would prefer that as a legislative body, we define what a data center is rather than having the planning board do it. But I'm more than willing to hear their advice and especially their recommendations on any kind of language that comes out of that definition. Because I think we, as the legislative body, are really going to start that conversation and really decide which way Greenfield is going to go. And that's kind of our purview, right? And so having had a number of conversations, I think that this might be the most beneficial way to go without rocking too many boats, because I want to have that public conversation, but I don't want to do it in a way that takes so long that it becomes obsolete. And I don't want to do it so fast that we break everything on the way.
So just so I'm clear, you had a couple of different options you kind of laid out here.
Yeah.
One is a moratorium.
Yes.
The other is a ban that we propose as a zoning text.
Yes.
And then the third piece here is a land use regulation.
No. So the first piece here, this is the moratorium.
Correct.
The second piece here, that's the ban.
This is the ban. Okay,
Yes.
so you just have
There
option
is-
one, option two.
There is a third piece that would follow.
Okay.
If we did the land use one, because then we can propose.
This is like we get to gigawatts of energy.
Exactly. Yeah, because I had originally proposed the tier 1, 2, and 3 classifications, things like that. But I realized that if we're going to change all those definitions to no, we're irrelevant and didn't need to blow up the book essentially.
But we might need that if the state says the Dover Amendment that you have to allow data centers.
Correct.
So
And
that's why we would have.
if the planning board decides that in the future, or if we decide in the future that, okay, we have developed the sufficient technology, let's have a data center, let's allow certain kinds, let's see what happens, that we have mature legislation that we've been working on in tandem with the city departments and the planning board that we can just launch so that we're ready and we don't have to wait to do this all over again, because this technology is developing so rapidly that the longer that we have these discussions, we're literally falling behind. Normally, when legislation hits the clerk's desk, it's already a year behind or so. We're already 2 years behind discussing this just now because that's how rapidly the technology is advancing. And it's happening, like I said, by the day. The reporter keeps coming out, like literally the day before I went to the planning department or the planning board, the state had changed their regulations. They had originally been exempting data centers from paying sales taxes on their equipment. Well, they recently removed that because people are very adversarial to the idea of these data centers. And so the state is getting more and more legislation. Oh, they have to be all green energy. Well, what does that mean? Does that mean that they're going to cut down all the forests and have large blacktop spaces to, you know what I mean? Like, what does that mean? And the facilities that we have here, like the hydropower facilities that are that are technically green, correct? And so we may not, right? We may be one of the rare perfect examples, a little bit like how the Quabbin is for Boston. now, our water and our resources could literally be for California or Meta or,
So you, just to kind of finish framing it, you're asking us if we would rather go with moratorium, ban, or neither, essentially.
essentially, I want to get a feel for the room because this is a large decision that's going to impact Greenville for the next few years, whether or not it's a moratorium or an outright ban. And I don't want to be the sole person bringing this forward, especially where I've only been on council for 7 months now. And I really don't, as a newer person on the council, I would prefer to have the feedback of senior members,
Councilman House.
So is the ban the one that's like the most like surefire way to make sure that something like this wouldn't just pop up? Or
The moratorium would effectively stop it, but only until the moratorium ends.
right,
And then after that, technically, somebody could be like, definitely a data center, sucks to be you, LLC, could come in and then, like the next day, plant their flag and we'd have no way of stopping
but
them.
the ban is the way to make sure that something like this doesn't come about.
Fundamentally, yeah. Mhm.
Because I think, I mean, as I liked how you were talking about how the technology is progressing and also so fast. And also we're learning about what is happening with them at a rapid pace too. Because one of the first things that was thrown out was like, oh, it's going to create so much jobs, and we're learning, oh, actually, they want the whole damn things to be automized. There's like barely going to be a person in there.
Mhm.
And
Hyperscale
then-
data centers,
Yep.
like, they only have like 50 people employed.
And the other thing is like, what is it for? Like, it's, I mean, I just want to say to the public, this is not, to make you, oh, how did I look if I was a cowboy, or like if I was a ninja, that's not what this is about.
It took me a second to understand why you're talking.
I've seen those like figures on like TikTok, my local, but like they're like posting all that stuff like randomly on Facebook. I'm like, okay, Cheryl,
Yeah.
that's cool. But like that's not what this is about. As much information as we're getting right now, this is about surveillance and control and data collection of individuals, largely without their consent, in order to have more control over your life.
I think even without nothing nefarious, the idea really is that, they're trying to cut about 44% of active jobs. We just had one of our first humanoid robots do 24 hours of warehouse work, sorting boxes for Amazon, and it sorted 22,000 packages.
God.
Right. So the more that this technology develops, the more AI centric it is. And I hate to demonize AI because it's here. We have to understand it. We have to learn how to use it responsibly if we're going to use it at all, right? It's here. Largely the demand for these data centers is AI driven. It's not us using the internet. It's not us streaming with our friends. It's not us going on video games. It's not tech developers. It's literally the top 1%, these corporate elite with this agenda pushing corporate AI and, Gemini, ChatGPT, those kinds of companies that are being integrated into all of our daily work lives, basically trying to eliminate jobs and change the nature of the economy. And so even without any nefarious intent, the results are going to be devastating.
Sounds pretty nefarious.
Well, there's a difference. I think there's a difference between like mustache twirling and like the market is inherently skewed one way. I think that's a different kind of thing.
And
And
when we're talking about a bubble on the level that this is,
exactly.
there's also an enormous economic risk in investing something, whether it's, money or our resources, our land, et cetera, in something that like the incentive right now is to build these things and push the technology, but it's not because there's a huge market for the technology. Like Amazon robots aside, right? So like that also puts every community that has a data center at risk because that bubble's very likely going to burst at some point, depending on who you ask. And then, we're left holding the bag of these like huge places that, we're using all these resources that like actually no one is, even using anymore, doing upkeep, et cetera. Like that's also a very real possibility of these things.
And one of the things that in between the last meeting and my meeting with the planning board, I found out that data centers actually compete with housing as well. So there's enough reason to even like from the perspective of a historian, like I would love to see our derelict buildings reused. Oh, you can't put people in there? You can put a server in there. But, you know, it's the old pipes, right? It's the old infrastructure. You know, 44% of houses, I think, are not considered suitable for things like node data centers, which are basically data centers that are being attached directly to people's homes. And these tech startup experiments, they're basically trying to use the untapped potential of the grid by they're basically spreading out the data center. So it's not one anchored location. It could be the entire city. And that is particularly why I have the phrase here, like regardless of the number of tenants, building square footage, phase construction, or current utilization levels, because we need to address the fact that different scenarios are going to come up where people are like, I'm not a monster. I don't have a huge footprint. I have 1,000 tiny footprints. Like one eye and 1,000 eyes don't make the same monster.
Are there micro data centers in Greenfield right now?
I don't believe so, but short of asking the building inspector and going through all the different permits that we've had, I don't know. I don't think so. The micro data centers specifically for the buildings, as far as I'm aware, they're only in California right now. But as the state continues to push for the data center things, and as these are pushed federally, those are the kinds of things that I expect to see more of, especially where Massachusetts wants to position itself as this innovative technological hub, basically Silicon Valley Junior. And those are real risks that I think a community like Greenfield that has been historically poor and things like that have to consider. You know, somebody asked me, what are we, a primarily white community, doing if we push these out to other disadvantaged communities? We are a disadvantaged community. You know, we are a poor rural community that doesn't have city funding or rural funding. We're kind of that catch-22 in between. And we also happen to sit on this well of potential green energy that a corporation could come in and basically be like, hey, Snow White, I have this apple for you. And that's, it's one of those things where it's very tempting to think that this is something that would be really good for the city. And in the short term, maybe, but even then they would bring in union jobs from other states. You know, it's not even necessarily that we would have our own jobs here to create those kinds of things. So like I personally, as I have said to this planning board, I personally would push for a ban outright, but I don't want to make that decision largely because I don't feel like it should be a one-person decision. And I feel like, as again, this would go before the whole council and it would go before the city at large and it'd be public hearings and things like that. I can push for this kind of legislation on my own, but I really think that it should be Greenfield deciding as a collective.
Councilman Haas, then Gordon.
I would push for probably like an outright ban. Also, just for the public, I think if there's a few names that you can look up, because a lot of our folks don't really understand like what is really happening with this stuff. What is this AI stuff? It kind of seems like magical. Like, okay, maybe it's a little bad for our environment, but it might bring a lot of tax revenue. I think it's important to look at what the people who are invested in this and pushing for it are believing and thinking. Like if you look up this Peter Thiel guy, he's like maybe the devil incarnate. Like he's maybe the closest thing to the Antichrist we're gonna get in this age. I mean, this is a person who doesn't necessarily want humans to be here a long time. Like these are not our friends. These are not people that we should like look up to or make space for. And all of their tentacles and new man-made horrors that they come up with, I think we should reject them outright. I don't like this at all because I get it, like the idea of, oh, we're just little Greenfield. Who's even going to pay attention to us? But given the resources that y'all have mentioned, like this would actually be kind of a cool little place for something like that. And if we're not vigilant about it, they might just swoop right in. There goes our water, which is already under threat. There goes our, general economy. And I don't like that.
Agreed. I'm curious if there's any reason not to do both, essentially, like a moratorium that gives us a little more time to work on the ban and make sure that like
We could absolutely do that.
Yeah. Because like I'm also long-term very much in favor of a ban, and I want to make sure that we do it right. And we're
Right.
considering all the factors and, you know, hearing from the public and all of that. And it seems urgent enough to me that a moratorium right now is a prudent thing for us to do, just to make sure that, you know, like we buy time that way, right?
Yeah.
For the rest of it. So I don't want to make it overcomplicated.
No, literally,
But
I understand.
like, and honestly, like the year-long moratorium sounded better to me, just because like 6 months is not actually enough time in the city council world.
I'm just concerned about bumping into budget season and then we have all the dumpster fires like merging into a big tornado of fire.
I appreciate the concern on that. I mean, also like a year from now is past, but you know, by the time that we would pass
Yeah.
this, we would be past budget season. And we did, you know, we do other things during budget season.
Yeah,
We need to, but I also don't want to like artificially give ourselves a different problem because we're trying to avoid a potential problem
Yeah.
that may not actually really be a problem. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that we give ourselves a lot more space and breathing room if we have a year-long ban. And yeah, 180 days is, I'm like, whoa, that's like, that's already
A
here.
lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
Yeah, that's essentially the end of this. Well, it's like early 2027.
Yeah,
It's gonna
and
come real fast.
And I had initially considered the moratorium going before the planning board again. The planning board had, they said that they weren't going to work on this unless they were mandated. And so I didn't want legislative drift.
Yeah, no, that's,
So I, you know, as I said, you know, the moratorium, all of this language, I think we should draft as, you know, as needed. And we could do the moratorium maybe as early as next month. If we get the
I
language
would be
right.
totally in favor of that.
'Cause we can't
then
do
have
it
time
tomorrow.
for a larger public conversation.
Next month would be the earliest we could do it.
Right.
Yeah. And so if we did the moratorium, I could submit it as 365 days or 360 days. It was 360 days before. But
366. A year and a day.
is it is it a leap year next year?
No. 2028 is the leap year.
Watch us, we have to do this on like a Saturday.
Would it be possible to account for the fact if the planning board decides to get uppity about it, just to put something in here that would say that if by the end of the moratoriums and the planning board, or we don't have something to consider, a ban would go into effect. So that at the end of the moratorium, unless we've decided that there's a nice.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong.
A ban would.
So correct me if I'm wrong, this legislation is a ban. And we have this legislation to pick at in the meantime. Correct?
Wait, sorry, what are you
when
referring
say
to?
You're talking about the non-highlighted document.
Yeah, the non-highlighted document is the
Mandate.
ban in case we wanted to go with the ban today. Yes, yes. And so this was the revision because I had already shown you guys the moratorium last time. And so I was like, I have a printer at work. It doesn't print in color. So I went over all the highlights that I made. But yeah, so the non-highlighted one is a ban with additional language. For example, it specifically says, you know, for purposes of this bylaw, data centers include but are not limited to hyperscale data centers, enterprise or co-location data centers, edge or micro data centers, and then fractional or distributed data centers, which accounts for things like those nodes. And it's just a little more precise, and it's just a flat out no in every category. And so is this, but this expires.
Right, but I think to Council Gordon's point, the moratorium would give us time to have a deliberative process.
Exactly.
Hear from the community, do more research.
Yeah.
We may end on a ban anyway, but if we're concerned about the moratorium running out, if we could put in a condition that.
Yeah.
Moratorium, the ban will go into place unless there's been.
We could.
Proposed.
Just on that kind of line, why not just have it? I notice here it says that the city council can extend it once.
Oh,
Why
Yeah.
not have it just
Right.
be
Be
perpetually extended unless the city council affirmatively votes to remove it? Like, is there any reason?
Because that's effectively a ban, right?
yeah, that might not fly in terms of a larger.
Yeah.
Right. Again, well, that's the same thing. So section 2G, if after the expiration of the blank day period, no revisions or recommendations are forwarded, then the council may vote to extend the moratorium by no more than 128 or 20 days. During that time, the council must, using the body of research that was generated earlier in the moratorium, basically generate its own revisions to the Greenfield zoning code.
Yeah, I guess, and then at that point, we could say, we would like a ban, please.
And so basically, the point of the moratorium is that the moratorium includes language that does not apply in the ban. And that language is basically that, as a result of this moratorium, the city shall, in conjunction with the planning board, conduct an internal analysis and or comprehensive study to determine the impact of said construction on police, fire, and emergency public safety, school district, water, sewer, roadway infrastructure, and the safety of the general public. During the term of this moratorium, such and such and such, review current zoning codes and regulations, develop a body of research on any impacts these facilities have on the community, and to make this information available to the public. Basically, if they're going to forward recommendations that are or are not counter to, what we have had going on and what we're proposing, then I want them to be able to prove it with facts, just like we're going to be able to talk about what we want with facts. And again, I don't want to position us in opposition to any one board, but the thing is that when I was researching this myself, I found a lot of ambiguous data because a lot of these are so new. And it turns out that many data centers actually come into municipalities with deliberate non-disclosure agreements that make it harder to find correct data. So there's a lot of data that could prove everyone's point. It's essentially, you're using AI Google search on regulations, and it's just a free for all.
Reasons why data.
You're literally getting it right. Exactly. Exactly. Plus you have this proliferation of like federal level down, data centers are awesome, blah, blah, blah. So you have articles on both sides. And so I want, especially where something like this is so impactful and so new, this is something that I don't think a special permit process would cover, because this is so novel. And I think that, whether or not we have information on one side or the other or both, whatever happens, having that conversation with the public as much as we possibly can leads Greenfield to have the best position. It's best foot forward essentially for whatever the next 5 years will throw at us.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Just a couple of smaller things in the moratorium language. Well, one thing is that in one place it says the city council may vote to extend the moratorium not to exceed 180 days. And I think that's in 2B, and in 2G it says by no more than 120
Oh
days.
yeah, it was a typo. Right.
So just FYI on that. And I think there's a difference between like revisions or recommendations being forwarded to the city council and us having like real time to have a process and deliberate on them.
Mm.
So I just want to be sure that we're being careful about the language there, because like if we don't have the ability to extend the moratorium because on day 179 something was forwarded to us, that's not actually serving the purpose that is intended with the moratorium. So
Section 2F, the Greenfield Department of Planning and Development shall, in conjunction with the planning board, develop a timeline within the 180-day period or whatever to allow for recommendation and adoption of amendments to the code in accordance with the procedure set forth in MGL. If during the study the staff finds and concludes any provisions of the Greenfield zoning code require revisions, recommendations shall be made accordingly within the timeline. But we can,
I
again,
don't think that quite addresses the specific concern that because that also still says that they have 180 days, but then it doesn't take care of the problem that on day 179, something could be forwarded to the council that then we technically can't extend the moratorium because we got something forwarded with 180 days.
So
you know what I mean?
let's go back and how long would, if we were going to do a moratorium,
Mhm.
which sounds like we're leaning that way, how long and how short should it be? Because if we give a year, we risk legislative drift and also the state kind of coming in and being like, hey, would you guys like a Dover amendment? And
Right. I mean, for me, it would make sense. A year makes sense. It's any number is kind of arbitrary, right? Like, but a year makes sense
Mhm.
just to give ourselves more time, but without giving ourselves forever, to your point. And that doesn't necessarily preclude specifying a shorter amount of time in which the Department of Planning and Development and the planning board have to develop a timeline, right? So I think that those numbers don't have to be the same. But, does that make sense?
What about like 8 and 12? 12 for the whole moratorium, 8 for the planning board.
It could even be six months to
Yeah.
develop the timeline so that we like make sure that something is moving. And that then we have 6 more months of moratorium in which we're working to consider it.
I'm not entirely confident we can compel the planning board to do this work necessarily. Like they, by the charter, they have to do the joint public hearing, as part of the zoning amendment process. But I'm not, they have their own charter language about their portfolio, and that includes developing zoning ordinance, the like. This is a zoning amendment. It's not a charter change, nor is it a legislative ordinance. And so if we're like, this is reading basically that they will basically do research. Part of planning and development, that's executive. We certainly could ask, it's Ellen Wise, but to do this work, and I'm sure she'd be happy to, work in conjunction with you on this. But the planning board already has a role in the sense that they will be handed the moratorium, whatever the final language is. I almost think it makes sense to not have them in this because they're already in the process as far as like, they can recommend language, in this document, make edits, and so especially considering they have some skepticism, I think they're gonna be forced to look at this because it sounds like we're leaning towards advocating, initiating it next month. And so then they will look at it and they will have their voice as part of the conversation. So I would just advocate getting rid of the planning board as far as a body that will be doing the research. If they want to, fantastic. Like I would the bright minds in that committee, and I really respect the planning.
They can bring recommendations, but it's like having this required.
Exactly, exactly. It's like, I don't even know if the word constitutionally isn't correct, but you know what I mean? I don't know if we're actually have the authority to compel them. And I kind of suspect that we don't,
Yeah.
but they do have to have a conversation and, whatever they choose, because they're going to see this anyway,
Yeah.
So that would just be my feedback. And I also, just to piggyback on the 365, I think a year makes sense. I have confidence in you that you're not going to let legislators. And, I think frankly, this committee is pretty intrigued by the idea, and I'm not interested in letting this thing drop and disappear.
Right.
So,
Yeah, I think that's another important point. I think we all are invested in seeing this move forward. Have you spoken with the planning director about
Oh,
this?
yeah.
Yes.
She was my first stop.
Great.
She was actually the one that recommended I talk to the planning board and then put me on their agenda.
Great. So she is,
Oh, yeah.
on board with that.
Yeah.
Great.
And this doesn't like take away anyone's ability to like make a internet cafe or a game. This is not like anti-tech or anything. This is specifically just geared towards these data centers.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah. So correct me if I'm wrong, basically get rid of section 2C.
I would say just the part.
Strike the planning board.
Correct.
Yeah, strike the planning board part. The rest of it is fine.
One other question, I don't know if we can do this in a moratorium ordinance, but can we add a timeline, like after, like by 180 days, the planning director will have come up with an initial recommendation to send to the planning board? So that,
Well, because the planning department is one person.
right. But I'm just wondering if to your point,
Mhm.
that we don't want to wait until day 360 before we see something. And yes, you can harass people to get them to try to do something, but is there a way we can set kind of a first step timeline in this to say that,
Reporting.
like a report out on,
Well, here's a question, because that's a good point. If we are doing this, are we also working on this are you also working on this as economic development? This is the ban.
That would make sense.
Yeah.
Because then we don't have to
With
wait
your
for
help.
language, we just have to have them yay or nay it.
Right.
We basically just need to get their feedback.
Right.
So that absolves them of having to do basically anything. Except, gives them an opportunity to speak.
I think they're going to be really interested in things like the definition of data center. Like that's part of what the planning board is really focused on, is making sure this stuff stands up and when it hits the ZBA, because especially if this is the kind of folks that, Councilman Minhas is talking about, they have the money to hire a lawyer to go to the zoning board of appeals and challenge an ordinance like this. And so that definition, like that really is the key. The data center definition needs to be rock solid, or else this thing won't stick. So out of curiosity, did this definition, did that come from Director Wise or?
No, this is a combination of legislation that I found, but particularly from Mansfield.
Okay.
Mansfield is very proudly, I believe, I think they themselves quoted themselves like, wow, I love English language, I'm very tired. they touted themselves as the first in the state to basically have language like this, as, you know, and basically ban or have a moratorium on data centers. I can't remember which one exactly it was, but, and so they had quite a large ordinance that I was able to skim off of. And then I knew there was one in Lowell, and the one in Lowell is, imagine the little cute house from Up, that little yellow house, and then imagine like the walls of Mordor behind it. There's a data center behind this guy's house in Lowell. So I was able to, you know, people have now had those kinds of conversations and they're really pushing. And so there are more communities that have been cropping up. And so I've been kind of skimming other language. I'm not a lawyer, like I don't speak legalese fluently. So it's a lot easier to find data center language elsewhere, but I believe ours is one of the first ones that specifically includes things like the nodes, like the data center nodes, and like fractured data center distribution. So we might be one of the first ones to have language like that. And I just happened to be researching housing because I was doing a housing academy. And I happened to find someone talking about that very incidentally. And I think that it shocked me a little bit because I, again, normally would think about a data center like a big room full of servers and no people, kind of like an Indiana Jones style warehouse that hums. But we really have to be clever because that is a very clever way to mitigate a lot of residential concerns about these kinds of data centers. And so the fact that like that particular kind of data center alone, the fact that it can literally be distributed across an entire city or an entire county or regional network, whatever size it is, those are the kinds of discussions that we're going to be having in 3 years, in 2 years. You know, as this technology continues to expand and the outcry continues to push, there's inertia that will take time for them to show up. And that was really a shot across the bow for like, whoa, we really have to open our minds and broaden the definition of what a data center could be. Because if we say it's a box with with servers in it, we're already losing. We're already behind.
Right. Yeah, no, I really appreciate the comprehensiveness that you've brought to this.
Absolutely.
I could give you my whole lesson. I went to the planning board with 14 pages of notes.
Amazing.
I still have the notes. So if anybody wants a large body of data, I actually happen to have a large body of data. And I assumed that we would be having a public hearing and I would be presenting that data anyway, which is why I kept it.
Thank you.
So, but yeah, I will take out the language regarding the planning board. I will take out the data. Or I will change the language from 180 days to 360 or 365 days. And then other than that, we could submit it and have it on the agenda for next month.
If you don't mind just running the definition of data center by Director Wise too.
Absolutely, 100%.
Feedback from her.
This was actually it was one of the things I changed the least.
Okay.
So she has already seen it, but I will check again. I will ask again.
That gives me confidence.
Absolutely.
That she's already seen it, feels good about it.
Yeah, the only sentence I added was regardless of the number of tenants, et cetera. But it was essentially a sentence in the lower part of the ordinance that I just moved up because it felt nice and tidy. So, but I will absolutely run these by Ella again. So
Anything else folks can think of that we want, sending people home with a lot of homework. But it's the council will to look at.
Quick question, just for the definition. So with the ban has the more detailed definition, but do we want to include these details in the moratorium definition so that everything is covered in the moratorium?
That's smart.
It's a really good idea.
I wasn't sure actually, because if we're having a ban, we're going to have to talk about specifics, but a moratorium is like zero, nada.
Yeah, but things can slip by that if
Sorry,
we
right,
aren't
very true.
sure about what
Yeah,
zero,
If somebody
what's
has
included.
the 1,000 little things
Right.
that,
because then you're opening up an argument about like, well, it's this small,
yeah,
so
the
does that
moratorium
count?
doesn't apply
And
because the
doesn't it,
moratorium
right?
just says this.
And again,
Yeah,
people
it's
can come
okay.
up with lots of different arguments on all this.
No, that's true. So what I'll do is
Like it's fine.
the only difference between this one and this one is that this one has those 4 categories. So I will add that language to the moratorium.
Yeah.
And there's the
Um,
extra sentence about the distributed modular network computing facility.
Yes, yes, yep.
But yeah, that.
No, that's still, again,
All of our
fantastic
research.
feedback. No, 100%.
The year while we look at.
I will leave this room with a much less of a headache than I did the last time I was here, so. Which was with the planning board stuff.
That's what we wish for.
Sounds good to me. Anything else, Chris?
Just
Did
a
you-
question. We don't have to, like, yes, we have to take into consideration what the planning board says, but do we don't, I mean, we're not bound by any law to.
They're advisory from what I understand.
Yeah,
But, you know, one of the things that, as truthfully, the Greenfield Stagecoach historian at this point, like people are talking to me like, aren't you the person with the, but I digress. As a student of history in Greenfield, Greenfield has a reputation for banning industry. You know, we were the ones that told Henry Ford, we didn't want him here in Greenfield because we had the tap and die, things like that. And so when I proposed this as a ban, and even though I really want a ban in my heart, I knew that banning something with the history of a town like Greenfield, I wanted to make sure that this was examined left, right, upside down, all different directions, because we have, as a nation, not only as a town, but as a nation, we have a history of the contemporary folks in modern day reconciling with the poor decisions made with good data in prior times. So, you know, things like the financial crises that we have today are because of legislation passed in the 70s and 80s and things like that. I didn't want legislation on something that's developing so fast to be a ban out of fear. I didn't want it to I didn't want to come up and be like, I'm scared of AI as an industry. You know, I think I wanted to make sure that we weren't continuing that historical trend of banning something just to say no. And, you know, that's why I've been pushing so hard for other involvement, even if the planning board is advisory. I feel like making sure that this has as much exposure to the public and as much exposure to the tooth and the grind and the nail of the public process as possible. That's going to make sure that this is really something that the majority of the public wants.
That's fair.
Also with the year, other bands are starting to roll in from other communities across the country, so that will give us a chance to see how other.
In fact, the New York attorney, I think the New York Attorney General, in New York, the state of New York, banned outright hyperscale data centers. They actually, oh, no, I'm sorry, it was a moratorium. They passed a moratorium on hyperscale data centers, which, if you're not familiar, they're proposing a hyperscale data center in Westfield. And so
That's a moratorium.
I believe theirs is in limbo. They're trying to stop it, and it's kind of like in the works, and theirs is going to be a harder fight than ours. But yeah,
Hyperscale ones are just the ginormous.
because, well, again, Westfield, like, is a community like Greenfield. They're like, nobody thinks about Westfield, nobody thinks about Greenfield until suddenly, and surprise. And to that end, I would say that the Vermont Yankee, I think it was, the nuclear plant over the border that just got taken down, they are proposing two things: a nuclear plant, and AI data center.
Well, and there's a lot of new investment in nuclear to
Right.
power data centers.
Right.
Right. So the people who worked for literally 50 years to get Vermont Yankee shut down, like, we'd have to do that all over again.
Yeah.
If that.
And
That is the first I heard of that, and
Yeah.
I have a feeling in my gut. You know, interesting.
well, that's the thing too. You know, one of the things about Greenfield banning data centers like this is so that we don't contribute to pollution downriver.
Right.
Right. And so anything that's upriver of us, that's water that we're going to be kayaking in and swimming in and letting our dogs swim in. And, you know, and even if it's not just the water, it's the
And
air.
it impacts people's drinking water.
Exactly.
Like
You know?
the stuff you see from
Seepage.
Georgia and like down south where there are
Exactly.
some of these, like people have drinking water literally coming out brown.
Yeah.
Not to mention that like their foundations are cracking because the construction of these things is so.
And I believe there's a new proposal for a battery storage facility in Irving based on the use of the Northfield Reservoir. So people already know about these sources of energy, the clean sources of energy that we happen to have here.
Right, the people who can make money off of it.
Exactly.
Are also be looking.
We're not as invisible as we think we are.
We are sometimes.
Ooh, well, this is,
Well, that's very good.
Yeah, this is a discussion, so there's nothing to vote on, but I think it's pretty clear that you have a blessing to go forward with a moratorium. And we'll initiate, you'll have to tell Tammy you want to initiate it next month when you've got the language, but
Yeah,
I think that's kind of the next step if that's where you want to go.
do you want me to, like, I just submit with all the edits that were suggested and just make sure it's hunky dory?
Just send an email to Tammy, Kathy, and Quinn, Laura, and myself, if you just say, I want to initiate the zoning amendment, and that's what starts it. And then that clock goes and you got to do the whole thing. If
Okay,
you're ready, if you're in.
I think so.
Yeah.
So all right, now just, again, I'm a little green. We initiate the amendment, I knew it was 8:30, sorry, guys. So we initiate the amendment, is that 21 days done?
No, I think it starts as soon as you have the first meeting about it. I think that's right. Again, this stuff is complicated. I have to look through it again. We got it some.
You can also ask the
Yeah.
clerk's office
Yeah.
about that because they.
Well, and
Yeah, this stuff.
again,
Tammy's got a
um,
cheat sheet. It's pretty awesome, which I wish I
Really?
had on. Yeah, no, she does. She's
So-
like all graphically organized.
and well, Councilor Golub had suggested that if we wanted to, we could do it as a legislative ordinance instead of a zoning ordinance,
I
but
don't think that's correct based on Al Norman actually sending us an email about Wendell. Do you remember they tried to do a zoning ban on battery storage and it didn't succeed because the Dover Amendment has this as a carve out. And so they did this legislative version of it at their town meeting and the Attorney General struck it down. So they tried it and it's like, oh, cool, that's interesting. And it didn't stick. So based on that experience that he kind of was emailing us about, I'm guessing it's the same kind of story here. If you're trying to legislate zoning,
okay,
you generally have to go to the zoning land use has to go through the zoning ordinance.
okay, no, that sounds fair. I like it. Okay, well, thanks everybody for taking the time. I'm gonna
Thank
go
you.
Thank you.
call my people. You all have your people call my people. Listen, I can only make that joke as long as nobody's doing this.
And on that note, our next agenda item is our recurring reports from the Economic Development Department, Greenfield Business Association. Neither of them were available this evening, so we will not be seeing them. Although we will be seeing Director Kaylin tomorrow talking about the Hope Street RFP. So that's pretty exciting. So that was originally on our agenda for this meeting and it got pushed to full council or so the whole public gets to hear about it.
Great.
So I'm looking forward to hearing what's in there and seeing something happen. So,
Great.
all right. If anyone wants to discuss that, we certainly could, but otherwise our next meeting is August 11th, 2026 at 6:30 PM in this very room, on Zoom as well, unless otherwise posted. I would entertain a motion to adjourn, if anyone would like to make that motion.
Second.
Excellent. And this one, I believe, has to be, no, it doesn't have to be roll call. Yeah.
Voice vote.
All right, all in favor?
Hi.
Aye. All right, we're done.
Thank you all. I'm very unlikely to be here for the next month. FYI.
Okay. All right. Good night, Greenfield.